feeling empowered.
Good afternoon and good evening and welcome back to the conference board, where today we're going to follow up on our Talent Management Strategies Conference with a conference keynote on Is Your Talent Strategy Future-Proof? I'm Jim O'Hearn. I'm the Executive Director of Engagement here in the Human Capital Practice at the conference board. Some of the topics that we're going to focus on today, we're going to walk through an introduction to BASF and a wonderful overview of the connection between the business strategy and the talent strategy. We're going to look at some of the key initiatives that have been introduced and how they're being measured within the organization. Then we're going to transition over to PepsiCo and look at how Pepsi has used analytics to guide the talent strategy. We're going to look at how digital is impacting that human capital work. And we'll talk about how the organization, the human capital organization, is making those insights actionable. For those of you that are interested in credits for the program, HRCI, SHRM, CPE credits are available. You need to stay online with us through the entire webcast if you would. You must be present to win, and please take full advantage of credits that are available. And let me introduce our wonderful panel. Ivory, tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Ivory Harris. I work for BASF, and I'm the Vice President of Total Rewards and Corporate HR Services.
So I'm Luciana Amaro. I'm the Vice President of Talent Development and Strategy for BASF in North America. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, I'm Beverly Trulli. I'm the Vice President of Human Capital Strategy and Workforce Analytics at PepsiCo.
All right, welcome everybody, and a couple of great organizations. We learned a lot at the Talent Management Conference and really looking to take the conversation further. And Ivory, you're really going to kind of BASF, you've tied in chemistry with people and really looked at integrating and connecting the talent strategy with the business strategy. Tell us more about how you've done that.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So when we think about chemistry, I think the partnership of Luciana and I here together, one representing talent and strategy and the other one representing total rewards, is really an extension of the BASF chemistry phenomenon, right? So first of all, we believe in a blended, holistic approach to total rewards, and we call that our compelling total offer. And I'm going to just set the foundation for our conversation here. So when BASF looks at how we create chemistry, we look at one of the key phenomenons that I think most people are aware of. More than 9 billion people will inhabit our planet by the year 2050. Now, this creates some concerns about resources. It creates concerns about urban living. It creates concerns about how we feed people, how we feed animals to feed people, and different things like this. BASF believes that chemistry is a huge part of that solution. And our global motto, our global mission is that we create chemistry for a sustainable future. The way that we do this is by combining economic responsibility, social responsibility, as well as environmental protection. A little bit about BASF. We are a chemical company. We're actually the largest chemical company by sales globally. We have 115,000 employees who partner with us to create and bring our chemistry ideas and solutions to life. One of the examples might be a tall building not too far from here, the One World Observatory. One of our key products actually was included in the construction of that to reduce costs for water, costs for electricity. So this is just an example of an innovation that came from our team in our construction chemicals department to support what really is an iconic structure and building in North America.
And you've really worked to connect the
Absolutely.
Talent strategy with this business.
Absolutely.
Tell us more.
Absolutely. So at BASF, everything is connected, right? So when you think about chemistry, you have integration of products, right? You have combination of chemicals and substances. You have connection. And we try to live that concept of chemical connection and chemistry throughout BASF. When we actually started to look at our total reward strategy, we started with our We Create Chemistry global strategy because that's where it all starts. There's an indelible connection, for instance, with talent strategy. We form the best team. And so we asked ourselves, what does the best team look like? What does the best team need? What motivates the best team? What inspires the best team? And then we connected that to our employer brand, which is the power of connected minds, meaning that bring your ideas, you are included, you are welcomed. We practice lifelong learning. We have a commitment for that. We have a caring environment, right? You can't disconnect yourself from yourself, so you bring your aspirations, your problems, your concerns, your ideas to the workplace, and we believe in total well-being, which really brought us to you at BASF, which is our total rewards approach and in homage to chemistry. It's imitating a periodic table. And when we say you at BASF, sometimes people think, oh, that looks like it's more individual than organizational. And it's really deliberate because we do believe that company growth loves happy employees. Those are not natural enemies, right? So the more engaged and connected an employee is, the more they are connected to our overall strategy, the more they are connected to our customers. So we see this as a construct across many different things.
And from this, you've built a very holistic approach.
Absolutely. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. So this is our
Wow.
periodic table blown up a little bit. A couple of different colors here, really just showing the diversity and the breadth of what we talk about. Now, what you'll see is that we have both traditional as well as differentiating components. So the traditional components of total rewards are, for instance, compensation and benefits, right? But when you look at it, we also include our commitment to learning and development, as well as the work environment, which really is the employee experience, right? So when we look at this, we asked ourselves some questions. What is it that we want employees to experience as a result of this? So when we have prospective candidates or employees, we want them to say, based on our competitiveness in the industry, the benefits we offer, the growth of BASF, the fact that we have a reputation of being one of the most well-managed companies in industry, so there's a level of security there. We want them to say, I want to work at BASF, right? When they come on board and they experience our employer brand of being caring and empowering and inclusive and supportive, we want them to say, I belong at BASF, which is really a connecting component. When they experience our commitment of employee development, having a strong performance culture, growth and innovation, we want them to say, I grow at BASF. And then when we experience the results of all of that put together, the way that we care for our employees, the way that we deliberately look at our total rewards benefits to be supportive of them, the way that we have managers, employees in all different areas be committed and have structures and philosophy around development and the results and the success that comes from that, we want to say we succeed at BASF. So those are kind of the things that we hope to gain as a result of our total reward strategy. Like oxygen and hydrogen and all of those other combinations, we truly do believe that the differentiating component is that all of these things work together.
Very cool and very, very holistic. And yet, you really work to align it with individuals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that what Luciana will, begin to talk about is how we bring that idea to life. So it's not just motherhood and apple pie, this I want to belong, I want to be there, I want to grow, I want to succeed. We actually develop ideas and programs and structures around that philosophy, and we hold ourselves accountable to that. And I'm really excited about the programs that Luciana will talk about that will demonstrate how we've baked all of that into how we develop our programs.
Absolutely. So thank you, Ivory. What I want to talk about is really diving a little bit deeper on the aspects that we feel are the true differentiators from an attraction, retention, and engagement perspective.
Great.
So we have the more traditional elements of total rewards, compensation, and benefits, but if we look into the sustainability and long term, we really believe that work environment and learning and development is where we have the best, I would say, return on our investment, right? So that is what BASF has been doing. This has been a journey, right? So in a journey that really requires a lot of partnership within HR, between Total Rewards, with talent and development, with D&I as well. So different areas of HR, and as we are an audience probably full of HR practitioners and leaders, I think that this is important for us to think about how we connect things internally so that the employee experience is seamless and they see the company as one company, right? So we say we act as one HR within the context of Total Rewards. So if you look into this slide, you have on the left side with the green squares, we have our elements for learning and development. And on the right-hand side with the orange elements, you have work environment. And let's start with the promise that we make to our employees and that we also use to guide our actions and investments in these two areas, right? So because this is the true north, right? So this is where we want to be. And as I mentioned before, of course, this is a journey. And I think that we are all very inspired throughout the process if we have a clear connection point where we want to get. So from a work environment perspective, we leverage those elements of our employer value proposition, caring, learning, connecting, and engaging, to develop what we call a work environment that leverages the power of inclusion. So this is how we want to be perceived internally and externally. From a learning and development perspective, we believe that talent is in everyone. So this is not only a motto, it's what we live by day in, day out. I have to say that I consider myself to be kind of a poster child of this concept. I have joined BASF 18 years ago, worked in 3 different countries, Germany, Brazil, and United States. I have had 10 roles already in this company, working with multiple businesses, stakeholders, and so on. And luckily, or not luckily, because there's a lot of strategy behind that, my story is not unique. You actually meet many employees at BASF that will tell you similar stories. So there's not one career track that is exactly like the other. We like to personalize and customize, and that I think is part of the strength of the concept of talent is in everyone. Development is not only for high potentials, but is for anyone who wants to do great work with BASF.
And I know you've got some great examples for
Yes.
us today, Luciana.
Absolutely, Jim. So let's start with the first example here, which is a new approach that we implemented in November of last year for onboarding. So it's a blended learning approach that really helps managers, employees, and the body, right? So the 3 key players during the onboarding process to drive an engaging and also, I would say, to drive that emotional connection of the employee with the company. So instead of walking through some of these topics, I actually want to play a little short video.
Great.
So that you can have a flavor of what my first year is all about.
Let's take a look.
Our research shows that a positive, well-constructed first year is critical for our ongoing success. Giving new hires the tools and resources they need from the beginning can help reduce their time to productivity and foster a highly engaging culture. It will set the foundation for a successful and productive career for people joining our organization. So that's why we've applied this research to create an innovative first-year integration experience for new hires and designed a formula for success for new hires. By answering 4 key questions throughout the first year, new hires will build a BASF success plan. The new hire is introduced to the formula for success as soon as they accept a job offer. And we give new hires the tools.
What a creative example. That's great.
Great, Jim. Thank you. So, as you see in the video, really the goal of my first year is providing managers, employees, and body with a structured learning path that will make sure that the right conversations and connections and touch points are being done at the right time. BASF is a very large company. Only in North America, we have 100 sites. So you can imagine that before that, the onboarding experience was very much manager dependent. and we have managers that were doing a great job, but maybe we have new managers that were not, yet familiarized with how to onboard an employee. So this makes sure that we have a consistent experience. So that is my first year, and I also want to talk a little bit about our conversational movement. So let me just, grow and tell, right? So what we also have now at BASF is this new concept, very innovative platform for learning for employees and managers, which the goal is basically to drive a culture of open, transparent, and ongoing conversations between managers and employees, and also between peers.
This is a very interesting platform, the way in which you've engaged leaders to drive this product, if you will. This is a wonderful example. Tell us more.
Absolutely. So the why, right? Why we started with this, and we actually started with this journey in 2016. It's because we got feedback from employees and managers that some of our processes, right, so performance management, development conversations, and so on, because they were very calendar driven, they were actually preventing the very thing that they were supposed to create, which is an open environment of conversation and dialogue throughout the year, right? So I think that anyone in HR will agree that the goal was never to harm that, was always to promote. But the way that people were so obsessed about the system, about the dates, about the checking the box and so on, that the conversation, which was supposed to be the key player there, and the quality of the conversation was getting a second place, right? So we really decided to work this also in a very innovative way. We didn't want to have another process to do this, because that would be a little bit ironic. We want to have something that is not mandatory, is what we call it is a movement, right? So we want to create a movement where people, managers, and employees are coming together to talk about conversation and to change the culture, and to really create that culture where open conversation, transparent conversation, just raw human conversation is part of our culture.
In kind of a cascaded way, where senior leaders are going to demonstrate what you're trying to achieve.
Yes.
Fascinating how you've done this.
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we're engaging senior leaders, but first I also want to play another short video here about Grow and Tell.
Great.
Imagine a world where we walk away from our conversations feeling empowered, where feedback leaves us with a better understanding of ourselves and what we need to be our best, where we take the time to inspire one another for action through our shared experiences. Having high-quality, frequent, and meaningful conversations helps build relationships, trust, and growth. At BASF, we want to accelerate a culture of feedback and coaching, increase self-awareness, and inspire continuous performance and development conversations that help each employee seize opportunities, take decisive action, and experience the power of inclusion. Introducing the Grow and Tell series, Empowering Conversations. This series of BASF short, interactive, virtual events are designed to empower you to have conversations that matter. Don't miss this opportunity to learn impactful skills from industry experts and BASF leaders that will help you up your game in your next conversation. The Grow and Tell experience offers exciting virtual events, opportunities to share your stories, and useful tools to help you grow in your current role or beyond. To find out more about Grow and Tell and how to take the next steps towards the journey of high-quality, frequent, and meaningful conversations, go to na.basf.net/Grow and Tell. Already had a meaningful conversation? Share it at na.basf.net/Grow and Tell for a chance to win recognizing you points and become a champion for conversations that matter. BASF, Grow and Tell, and you, together creating chemistry through powerful conversations.
BASF, we create chemistry.
Very involved. Tell us more.
Absolutely. So one of the key components of Grow and Tell are really these virtual events that we're running, 3 per week. So during the period of 4 months, around topics that are related to conversations, right? So we believe that conversations are foundational for anything that we want to drive, from development to better, performance conversations, to empowerment, to inclusion. And so what you see there on the slide on the left-hand side are the content areas, right? So why conversations matter, managing yourself around emotional intelligence, how you come across, and so on. Coaching and feedback, performance and development, empowerment and accountability, and the power of inclusion. So these events are 1 hour sessions. And we have what we call our magical formula, right? So it's 20 minutes of content, 20 minutes of the leader sharing honest and open perspective around these topics and what conversations have to do with that, and also 20 minutes of open Q&A between the audience and the leader. So we actually have invited our VPs and above, so senior executives, to be co-facilitating these events with us, and this generated an amazing buzz around the company, right? So I remember that you asked me a question, Jim, the first time we talked about this, is like, how do you train the senior executives? How much preparation?
How do you prepare them?
We actually don't.
And they actually perform.
we actually don't prepare them, which is, I think, part of the magic of this, right? So there is so much knowledge and wisdom that you can leverage right inside of your company. And this also makes them become role models and champions for this movement. So we're very excited. You can see by my face here and how I talk about this. Just to give you some example of feedback that we have been receiving about Grow and Tell, 97% of the 1,500 employees who joined the virtual event so far, so we had 14 of them, actually would recommend that session to a friend, right? So we have 3 short questions at the end of each session. Can you use this for your development? Do you think that this was useful content for you? And would you recommend this to a friend? And that is really our most important KPI, 97%. So almost all of them.
Yeah.
And we are really driving a lot of buzz and movement in the company.
Those are great results. And when you see some of those topics, walk the talk, coaching and feedback, managing yourself, why conversations matter, those aren't necessarily. It's really good to hear that leaders step right up to those, have stories to tell, and are demonstrating the culture that you're trying to build.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great example for all of us.
Absolutely.
But you're also using some nice measures, not only for that's one key indicator of that program, but you've also got other measures on the outputs of your talent strategy and its impact on the business that were really interesting for everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, so of course we're very excited about what we've put together. We think it's brilliant. But more importantly, we want to make sure that other people feel the same way that we do. So we measure ourselves both internally and externally. So we have some results, as you see here, from some of our internal surveys, whether it's our total reward survey, our global employee survey, as well as our trust index that we've been doing. And as you can see, these are all really great responses and numbers. I think they're above the benchmark when you think about it. Also, when we look externally with Indeed.com and different organizations, we get a similar rating and understanding that we're 4.2 out of 5 that above our direct competitors, right? So Indeed.com is not something that BASF leads or owns. It's really something that is connected with external potential candidates as well as people who are current employees of BASF. And from an attraction perspective, we got a really strong score there. Additionally, if we look at some of the very respected industry organizations, also just organizations that care about and are passionate about employee experience, total rewards, how companies really include and incorporate the perspective of employee in the definition of success, we're also highly recognized by those organizations as well, and we're really, really proud of that. So to me, this just goes back to what we said from the beginning, that engagement, total rewards, this blend of employee experience, traditional and differentiating components of total rewards, is not motherhood and apple pie. It really is strategy, and we feel that it is making a sustainable competitive advantage for BASF. So we're really proud of it.
Wonderful story, and a real inspiration for all of us as talent professionals. We may come back. The chat box is open. If you have questions, please bring them on. We want to continue to interact around the topic areas. We'll move over to Pepsi. Beverly, another fascinating story. And you're really going to work with us today on how Pepsi has integrated the input you're getting from analytics and how you're using that to drive the human capital strategy, how you're using that data, those analytics, to really craft insights for the business that you're working to make manageable, or make operational within the business. And along the way, you've kind of learned a fair bit about a maturity model for us. Great story. So tell us initially about, well, Pepsi is more than we might initially perceive. Tell us more about Pepsi.
For sure. So, everybody knows us by our namesake, right? Pepsi. But we're really much bigger than that. So you see a few facts on the slide that are interesting. So, we're about $63 billion in net revenue every year, about 250,000 employees globally, and we operate in 22 countries and territories around the world. Interestingly, our products are consumed over 1 billion times every day, which is really fascinating, and we're one of the biggest food and beverage companies in the world. We have 22 billion dollar products, and so what you see, a few of them here. So Pepsi, Lay's, Tropicana, Quaker, and Gatorade are some of those. So big, complicated sometimes, and interesting to gather all this information. We generate a lot of it, so from an HR perspective.
1 billion times. Our products are touched 1 billion times a day. First time I've heard that one. That's
so
amazing.
Hopefully you've all had some today. So.
That is amazing.
And just to give you a little bit of context, and it's important, and BAS talked about the same thing, the sustainability agenda, which is very important to us. We operate under a sustainability umbrella around these 3 pillars that you see on the slide. So our products, making them more healthy, right? So lowering saturated fat, salt, and sugar. Around our planet, obviously, consumer products company, we generate a lot of packaging that we need to make sure is sustainable. And lastly, and importantly for me, the people agenda. And so you see 3 themes underneath that, which is around human rights, diversity, and prosperity in our communities. And my team, and the reason I think this is important is my team does a lot of work with our diversity agenda, and you'll see some examples of that as we go. So, as Jim pointed out, one of the things I'm here to talk about is really how we use data and the insights that we generate out of that data for 2 things, really. One is kind of creating our talent strategy or our human capital strategy, and the other is really like making things actionable, things that are tangible and that our HR team can use. And this might seem like a strange slide, right? Because I'm starting out with definitions, but when I started in this world, what I found was there was a lot of confusion. People will use the term, analytics has now been with us in HR for probably 5 or 6 years, right, where it really took hold. And it gets thrown around a lot. And what I found was it was a little bit confusing. What do people mean when they say analytics? And so what we did was we created our own maturity model. This is not very different than others you might see out there. But we felt it very important to sort of have a common framework that people could talk about. Because there are other groups in the organization that do things in this analytics world, but mostly on the reporting side. So my team does not really deal with those first 2 levels of maturity that you see there. We really are more around what we call the advanced analytics. So we're developing models, we're doing sort of the big data work in the organization. And then on the right side of this chart, I think it's very interesting. In HR, we're not great at being clear about what we mean when we say certain things. And so, I would challenge everybody on the webcast today to go out and just Google talent strategy and see what you come up with, or Google human capital strategy or HR strategy. And are they different? Are they the same? What's included? What's not included? And so, we sort of felt the need to kind of define this for ourselves. And I'll explain a little bit how we do human capital strategy at PepsiCo. But I do think that this is important, and I think it's something that as we get better at becoming more disciplined in HR, that we get clearer on what we're really talking about. Because I think it serves us well in terms of what we can do for the organization. It's also a way to communicate to our business partners better what we're all about.
It's a great point and a great place to start. We do throw these terms around, and to be very clear before we go very far with strategy and integration of analytics to define this is really a nice model. And why don't we take a minute and poll the audience and see where you are with your analytics and integration strategies at this point. Let's put up our poll. We can't see the poll results yet. And I'm going to come back to this in a, well, let's see here. I think we're just about finished.
Do we need to advance?
I can't see our results. Okay, so level 1 and 2 in the 50% range, and level 3, basic analytics. Interestingly, 40% of the audience is saying that they're at that point. How does that correspond with what you typically see, Beverly?
In other organizations?
Yeah.
Actually, that's a little more, I think, than I would have expected in the advanced analytics.
Yeah, I would
the
agree.
basic analytics piece, I think. So a more sophisticated audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. So I wanted to share a little bit about how these two things come together in my world. So, you know, we very intentionally put analytics and strategy together at PepsiCo. In a lot of organizations, that analytics function would be within our HR operations or an HRIS group. But to me, these are all kind of related, and it creates a virtuous cycle. So as you pointed out, Jim, early on, the way I look at this is, you know, we use all of this data, whether it's internal, external data, to generate these insights about our workforce, which then feed into our strategy, right, around our human capital. And, you know, we look at strategy, human capital strategy, at different levels within PepsiCo. So at the very highest level, we're looking at an enterprise level. And I call those themes kind of the things you have to get right. So it's like a lot of the things that, you know, Ivory and Luciana were talking about. But we also do strategy work at the very lowest level, the business unit level. And we have a very well-defined process called the strategic workforce planning process, where we work with our individual business strategies and then use workforce data to actually come up with what are some of those talent gaps that you would have to fill in order to meet those business strategies. And then, as I mentioned earlier, diversity is a big topic for us. And so we're often asked to do work around the, you know, certain cohorts, so women or people of color, or millennials, for example, right? So everybody wants to know, do those groups differ in some way, and how do we encourage more of them in the organization? And then, of course, those strategies lead to some tools, processes, changes, and things that we're actually going to do within the organization where you are around the execution, which oftentimes require additional data to actually create those tools. I'm going to give you some examples of those later. And they certainly generate more data that then feed back into our models. So it's kind of a nice virtuous cycle in terms of how those two things come together.
It seems like you've invested a fair bit. You've invested a lot in this integration of all this data, good data, with the strategy. Why is that?
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about that. You know, we all talk about digital, right? So everybody, you know, when I did the original conference board presentation, I polled the audience, you know, informally and said, how many of you are not going through a digital transformation right now? And not one person raised their hand. So everybody is transforming into something. But, you know, just like other pieces of the organization, HR is becoming more digital. And, you know, to me, digital is not just new technology. We like to talk about AI, we like to talk about robotics, we like to talk about all of these new technologies, but and those are important. And we also like to talk about big data, right? That's the other piece of that. But for me, that's only a piece of becoming more digital. It's really around doing things differently. And again, if we're going to move HR forward and being more digital, you know, for me, it means, are you able to predict better? Are you able to forecast better? And are you monitoring the you know, programs, for example, like BASF is doing, you know, and how are you doing? And how do you constantly improve those? And for me, this is really the key here. And so, you know, I think some of the work we're currently doing is helping to move us along that digital journey.
Another great model there. And why don't we check in again and see where you are on your digital journey? Everybody's on one. Let's put up another poll here. How far are you along? Haven't even thought about it. Just starting. Everybody certainly thought about it, I think. Interesting results. Let's give it another 5 seconds and we'll close it. And that's it. All right, closed. And interestingly, just 40%, have started and along. 51% saying that they're building some interesting capabilities, some capabilities. It is interesting how we're on a journey and moving along, and organizations are building capabilities around digital.
That's terrific.
Fascinating.
Maybe I can learn something from everybody in the audience. So I wanted to change gears a little bit and just talk about a few examples of how we're taking some of the data and models that we're building within HR and helping in a very practical way our HR partners do their work. And the first example comes from one of our North America businesses who was looking to help forecast campus hire needs. So, I think we're all pretty good at workforce planning. So, for example, how many marketing people will we need next year? But this business was asking a slightly different question. So it was around our sales and supply chain populations. And those are our biggest employee populations globally. This happened to be in North America, but they were asking the question, how do I know when I go to campus in September to go recruit, how many people to hire when they join in June? And more than that, how do I know at each particular plant and sales location? So I want to know it by you have 100 plants, we have probably more than that on both sides of our business. But it was a very specific question that we're asking. There's seasonality involved also with our businesses. So what we did was we used all of our historical data that create these models at every single site location so that they could actually take a look and put in various parameters. So we know how many people get hired historically, how many people get promoted historically, how many people leave historically. And we can actually predict for them on a monthly basis how many people they should be hiring in September for June. And what we're starting to do now is also build in the cost piece of this, and it's allowing them to do some scenario building too. So for example, if for some reason something is changing in the business and they think that's going to be an increase in the business, they can modify those parameters for themselves. So again, this is letting them do a lot more accurate forecasting and what if scenario planning with their business partners. So this was a huge win with our HR business partners and actually with our business partners, and we're starting to expand that to other pieces of our business.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Another example is also around campus recruiting, but it was a very different problem and it was a very different partnership. This was really partnering with our talent acquisition team. So if you're like most companies out there, PepsiCo goes to certain campuses. We tier them, right? Some are big campuses that we go to, but we tended to add over the years, but we never took any away. So what happened was we found that we were, with very limited recruiting resources, we were going to too many schools and we weren't doing it very effectively. But they didn't have a way to say, well, which one shouldn't we go to any longer? And this was a project that helped them to identify which college campuses were the most productive for us. And so it was a true partnership with our talent acquisition team and our HR business partners. This was actually not using internal data, but it was actually using some external data publicly available from the Department of Education in the United States. It's a database called IPEDS, if anybody out there is interested. Tons of data out there. But what we did was we worked with the talent acquisition team and the HR business partners to define criteria. What makes a good campus to recruit from? And we came up with 10 criteria, which we weighted. And then what we did was we used that IPEDS database to rank every single, it's 7,600 two-year and four-year colleges into this tool so that you could sort by any criterion or an overall basis and see were the schools that we were going to the most productive. And in some cases, what we found was maybe we shouldn't be going any longer. And we also uncovered a few where we should go that we weren't currently recruiting for. And so, it had a number of benefits. One was it's allowed us to reduce the number of campuses that we recruit from by 30% this year. tasks that used to take 3 weeks for our campus recruiting team to do now take them 30 minutes because they can just click around in the tool. And importantly, not as sort of data driven, but it allows them to have very rational conversations with those business partners, because often those schools are the ones that some executive has attended. And so, it's a hard conversation to say, well, maybe we shouldn't be recruiting there any longer. But now we have the data to be able to make the argument as to why that might be. And so all the way around, it's been a huge win for both us and for our talent acquisition and HR business partners.
Yeah, what a couple of great examples. Let's go around the horn again and talk about key learnings. What would you say are some of the key insights that you've taken away, or HR has taken away from the journey so far? And Beverly, let's start with you. What would you say are some of the key takeaways, and then we'll come around for other recommendations you have for our colleagues that are on a similar journey?
Yeah, let me share this slide with you. This is, a kind of demand curve, if you will, and I'll share with you some of the lessons learned here. But there are a few key points on this slide, and the first is it's not a linear journey by any stretch of the imagination. And I think, it sounds like a lot of the audience are already on their analytics journey or their strategy journey, and so probably are kind of well past the first few years. But what I found personally in this experience was that it can tend to seem a little bit slow at first, like you're not making real progress, like people don't really understand what it is that you're bringing to the party. And that's okay. So that non-linear nature, I think you just have to sort of live with for a little bit. I think the other thing that I learned was to, informally benchmark. I'm not a huge benchmark fan because I think, you have to kind of define your own journey. But when I came into this team, I kept asking my team members, who does this really well? Who's like really, really good at this? And I joined organizations like the Conference Board so I could tap into that kind of network, but build that network of other people who are kind of going through the same thing and learning from them. I think the third thing is, you're going to have to do some really nitty-gritty basic stuff that doesn't seem like a lot of fun and doesn't look like a big payoff, but getting that foundation built is very, very important. And it leads to the last one, which is you're going to see an inflection point. So once you get those foundations built, all of a sudden you start to see the applications tick up. And right now, what we've found, at least at PepsiCo, is, we're getting calls all the time. Can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? And you do have to manage that a little bit because that leads you to a lot of, kind of one-off projects. But it's quite invigorating, right? Because people finally see the value in what you can bring to the party. So, if you're sort of at the front end, don't get discouraged because it will happen.
Yeah.
And if you're at the back end, I think, you're in a good spot.
Yeah. To that point, though, as you start getting the calls start coming in and there is more interest, how do you balance the resource allocation and the building of your capabilities?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I give a lot of thought to, what percentage of our work needs to be sort of more strategic, right? And what needs to be sort of more practical. Yeah. And, I do find a lot of value and satisfaction in really helping our businesses. So, if we have a business that has a specific question that we can help them answer, and sometimes it takes a lot of creativity. And, some of the work we're doing now is really trying to take the HR data, merging it with other data, whether that's, customer data, consumer data, financial data, to try to answer some of those business questions, which I personally get very excited about. I mean, I think that's really the kind of holy grail is when you can do those sorts of analyses. But if other companies are like us, data is not always easy to get. In different systems, we're lucky to have all of our HR data in one place, but other data sometimes you have to go to different systems for or just know people. But it's really that balance of you have to ring fence some amount of time and resources to do that strategic work versus the kind of day-to-day application.
That's a nice way to make the distinction. Yeah. Luciana and Ivory, considering BASF has come a long way on the journey and has built a very holistic system where you have some very nice measures around, what would be some other key learnings for your organization and suggestions for our colleagues?
So I'll get started. Yeah, so the first thing, I think I talked about it a little bit, is that whole integration component of chemistry. is you want to start with the why and the business impact. And I think the reason that's important is because oftentimes when you talk about things that are to the benefit of an employee or that help make the employee experience more rich and fulfilling, there's a bias that this is an HR topic. And the truth of the matter is that this is not an HR topic, right? This is a business topic and it's a leadership topic and it supports strategy and supports us having a very strong and sustainable competitive advantage in the market for customers and talent, right? So for me, that holy grail to steal from you is that foundation has to be built on a partnership between human resources and leadership. This is a business imperative. So for us, it was very critical for us to make sure that that was the foundation of this. I think that having a beautiful periodic table is great, and a little plug, and having all of the feedback and the connection is really great. But I think kind of what's a differentiator for all of that is how do we stay evergreen and how do we make sure that we're changing as the organization changes and that we're not so married and connected to what we created before that it blocks us from creating in the future. And that, frankly, that the foundation is something that is flexible enough that it can be responsive, to all of those different changes. And, it seems like it's a little bit of a no-brainer, but sometimes in these you get, BASF is very respectful of process, and we're an organization of scientists and intellectuals and all of this. And so sometimes we really love to make sure that we have the right process. We cannot forget the change management component and really the human component of this. So we actually feel that the partner of any type of process or any type of idea that we have has to be, how do you, as Luciana put it before, talk to the heart and minds of people to say, why is it important for you to be engaged with this and for you to accept this and for you, to move forward. So we believe that change management is the partner of any of these things because we're working with humans and humans have different needs and humans have different responses to change. So how do we help them engage and continue and demonstrate and take this to the next level?
This group next door is actually the Change and Transformation Council.
Wow, we're in the right room.
Yeah. But it's
you can feel the vibration.
Yes.
And it's so interesting that so often we say great tools, great resources, great people, and we can't forget about change.
Exactly.
And got to make sure we're tying this to business.
Absolutely.
What are the business outcomes?
Absolutely.
So from my side, one of the things that I was thinking is really like when I think about a total reward strategy, our employee development approach, the power of inclusion and the things that we are driving in terms of transformation within HR, I think about how BASF looked like in all these senses 18 years ago, right? So it was a company that had virtually not a strong, reputation from a talent market perspective. It was always a very strong reputation from a product, from a chemistry, from a management. And of course, with a very strong footprint from a talent perspective in Germany, right? So if you're a chemist in Germany, or an engineer, BASF is really this major, force of nature, But if you go to certain markets like, the United States or Asia, South America, right? So, and also we have to face the reality that companies like PepsiCo, or J&J, or, other companies that you actually grow up consuming their products, people have much more of an emotional connection to those companies than a company that you don't know exactly where their products are going to go, right?
Yeah.
So I want to say that, challenge the status quo. Just don't accept that we cannot do those things, right? So I remember hearing employees and leaders in the past saying like, a company like BASF, it's tough because it's B2B, because nobody understands, exactly where the products go, or we don't have that emotional connection to the product. But don't accept that, right? So I think that what we've done over the past, I would say, this is a 10-year journey that we are talking about some of these things, the total reward strategy and things like this. This came from individuals that believe that they could make that different, right? So leaders that had that foresight in terms of saying we can actually elevate the image, from a talent market perspective of BASF, even being like a B2B company, to a place where people can actually find that, wow, this company has a huge purpose, right? So it's helping the humanity, right? So it's helping life on Earth, right? So that's what we're doing. We're driving sustainable solutions. We help our customers. So I think actually nowadays what we hear from people, first, like, you were talking about campus recruitment. I mean, the space that we got, with even like younger generations, right? So folks that are really recognizing BASF as, I want to work for that company. We just got top 17 at Diversity Inc., right? So it's fantastic. Universal, we keep skipping like 10 levels, right, every year. So these are just some of the things that actually show us that, as HR, I think that we have an obligation of not accepting that the status quo needs to continue like being the status quo.
It's a great point. It's a great point. Transformation starts at home.
Absolutely.
And we've got to be ready for it, and with the data. And some interesting questions from the chat box here. One person says, I'm sorry, I missed that conference. Looks like it was good. But interesting question about talent operations. Somebody's asking about international moves.
Yeah.
How have you set up an international swap? And how might one go about doing something like that?
Absolutely. So BASF actually invests quite heavily in expatriation, right? So both sides, like folks going to other to the headquarters in Germany, also coming to the United States, going to Asia, South America, and so on. So we are a very international company. We actually, like, the diversity of our businesses actually require us to do that. We have 12 businesses, 16 functions, and they are as different from performance products to coatings to agricultural products, crop protection. So they're very diverse portfolio. So we actually love to have people exploring different paths and tracks. And of course, it always starts with the partnership between the employee and the manager, right? So our employee development process actually establishes that one of the first things that we want to have is that employees talk about their aspirations to their managers as they're having development conversations. We do have, and we say that the managers should guide and coach employees. We offer multiple forums where leaders get together to talk about their people and who needs what and what are some of the development opportunities. So a lot of the magic happens in bringing leaders together from different business units. We also have, this is just like from a I would say the more coordinated approach, but we also have like many cases where folks simply raised their hands and tapped into their network and said, like, look, I'm I really want to have a job in Germany. Can you help me? And things happen also that way, right? So there's a more formalized approach,
and
but there's also
one.
more informal, and they can just apply and so on. Yes.
Yeah. So these are some very sophisticated systems that you've both built. Let's talk a little bit more about the future. If we, it's a little early for 2019 planning, but we're starting to get there. And what do you think, Beverly, when you think of analytics for next year, what's your sense of what you think might be a couple of key initiatives or where you see it going in the next year?
Well, it's a very good question. You're right. It's a little bit early, but but not too early. We really start thinking about these things in the summer. I do think we're sort of at a specific point in maturity in workforce analytics, and I do worry a little bit about it. I think, I wonder sometimes whether it should stand alone in HR, and I don't necessarily have a point of view yet on this, or whether it should become part of a bigger analytics function in companies, and I'm sure there are some companies out there who are already doing that. I can see pros and cons of that, but I do think the real value again in workforce analytics is going to be in bringing that workforce data together with other types of data in organizations. And I think the easiest way to do that is to create sort of one big analytics organization. If you think about it, lots of companies have chief data officers or chief analytics officers. I don't know what we'll do at PepsiCo, if that will be something that we look at, but I do think that's something that we should all consider in terms of where workforce analytics goes in the future. I also think, and again, it depends on the organizational culture, but doing when I first got into this, I kept asking, just because we can do things, should we do things? Because there's some very intrusive things you could be doing with data, as we've all seen, some very public examples of things that we didn't know were happening with our data. So there's always the question of how do you address that too, right? So you can do it, maybe the part of it is opt-in, right, where you can personally identify what you're doing. I'm sure companies out there are already doing this, but organizational network analysis, for example, right? What's your business reason for doing it? It would be an interesting intellectual exercise, for example, but you have to have a good business reason for doing some of these things. And I think one way around the confidentiality issues are having opt-in types of things. So I think it's new tools. I think it's kind of looking at how we bring more data together. Those would be sort of the two things that I would be looking at for 2019 and beyond.
Great point. Yep. Luciana and Ivory, what do you think might be on the docket for BASF next year?
So we actually are in a phase where we have gotten quite a bit of feedback, both from employees as well as some of the external organizations, and we are revalidating in many cases what is really truly valuable for the organization. There's been a lot of industry consolidation, right, and that always has an impact on what competitiveness looks like, and so we're reevaluating that. From a total rewards perspective, just specifically looking at, for instance, compensation and benefits, one of the things we're looking to do, Luciana and I have had this conversation. I think one of our leaders told us that between the development options as well as the benefits, it's almost like having a Cheesecake Factory menu, right? So there's a lot of options, and so we're actually looking to synthesize, simplify. We want to, make sure there's a lot of tools out there. Organizations are leveraging data to get quite sophisticated to help the employee, at the cross section of need and opportunity, identify what would be in the best interest for them, and based on what we have, also to identify gaps of what we don't have. So a lot of it is not necessarily to continue to create and continue to add, but to build saturation and usage and mind for satisfaction and value and things like that. So I think we're looking to leverage data and feedback basically to have more integration, more simplification.
Well put. Yep. Luciana, anything to add?
From a talent strategy standpoint, simplifying our processes is top at the list, right? So talent review, performance management, integrating. So we work very closely together on this. I would say digitalization is another big topic, right? So we are also looking into two areas. One is how do we create efficiency in HR through digital technology, but to become more predictive, right? So more consultative in terms of how we deal with our businesses. And also at the same time, how do we enable the organization to embrace digital technologies, like from a leadership standpoint, from an employee skill standpoint, and so on. So these are two top topics amongst others.
Well, Ivory and Luciana and Beverly, I too am sorry I was late for that conference, and it sounded like a great one. Thank you for an overview of two great organizations doing some exceptional work in talent management. Thanks for coming in and sharing it with us and our colleagues here at the Conference Board. We've got another key webcast coming up in July on the 24th. Very relevant topic, advancing gender parity. New strategies to develop your organizational change leaders with the CEO of Claire's. Ron Marshall will be here along with Jackie and Natalie from Thomson Reuters. Proves to be a very rich conversation. There are also some very good resources available throughout the Conference Board. Please take full advantage of them. We look forward to working with you in the business community. We look forward to generating insights that we can put into practice in our businesses every day. We thank our practitioners for joining us for these types of rich conversations. Thank you for your interactivity and your interest. I'm Jim O'Hearn. Until we see you again at the Conference Board, have a good day.